Welcome to Tuesday. It's February 2nd, 2021. Well, folks, there is a lot on the table, lots to talk about as we go through the next several days, as changing weather is definitely coming. We just got to get the details all worked out. It's going to be almost spring-like today. In fact, you might get a little bit of spring fever. There'll be temperatures in parts of eastern Wyoming, western Nebraska, eastern Colorado in the 50s and 60s today. Sunshine mixed with high clouds is high pressure, but the however in that title means, the changes are coming. So you want to take advantage of today through midday tomorrow. Temperatures are going to be very mild and the weather looks good. But a trough moves in Wednesday into Thursday with colder temperatures and snow. We're going to see the western areas, places like Yellowstone Park, Idaho, the Pacific Northwest, get into the snow late tonight and early tomorrow. In fact, late tonight and tomorrow morning, it'll be snowing in some of the mountains in northern Colorado and southern Wyoming. Colder air overspreads the plains during the day Thursday with some snow, but it'll be the high country that gets most of the snow. The snow on the plains won't be too extensive, but it will be enough to make roads and highways icy. Now, another wave of cold and snow is coming late Friday and into the weekend. It's this wave of snow and cold that's giving us fits with the forecast, and I'm going to show you that here in a minute on why it's giving us fits. I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen. Big model differences are really wreaking havoc on the forecast for this weekend and next. I say this because if one of these computer models is right, there could be a huge difference. And if one is right or one is wrong, it's going to make a big difference on what ends up on the forecast at your favorite weather website you go to or the weather forecast you get on your smartphone. I'll show you why that's really important when we look at these model differences. This is a great pattern for the mountains to get snow. I think the mountains over the next couple of weeks, we'll see more snow than they have all year. Now, it won't be high water content snow like you get in the spring, but there's going to be an uptick in snow in the high country in this pattern. This is where we are today, enjoying this high pressure ridge and the southwest winds bringing desert air and air from Southern California into the Rockies and high plains. But you can see all the blue up here. There's the cold poised to move in. Here's the storm that's currently hitting the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast really, really hard. There's a lot of winter going on over the last couple of weeks. A lot of it's been in this part of the country. Now, what'll happen is you'll see some changes as we go forward with these low pressure systems in this area of cold. So this is where we are today. By Thursday morning, this system up here breaks off and swings through as a pretty good trough coming on through along with the cold front. This is going to bring the mountains some snow late tonight through Wednesday night into Thursday. Goodly amount of snow with some snow on the plains. Then notice, it doesn't look like much, does it? But you see this little ripple, this little dent in the upper levels right here? This is another little wave that's going to be dropping south. And as it comes south, it's going to be dragging cold air up here with it. And that's what is poised to come on in. And also we've got that high established out in the eastern Pacific, which is what we need for this type of pattern. So this is the first salvo of winter weather to come in. It's going to be late Wednesday into Thursday. It doesn't look terribly or brutally cold with this first wave, but it will drop temperatures a good 20 to 30 degrees from where we are going to be today. The Arctic oscillation is still in the negative phase right now, and over the next week it is going extremely negative. If you get to an Arctic oscillation of -5 or 6, it's a very strong indication of cold air moving off the pole and heading into the lower latitudes. As we take a look at what is going to be developing for the weekend, this is where the forecast is running amok. We are looking at some really big differences in how the models handle this Arctic air. I'm going to show you three models. The three models we probably use the most. The European model, and then the Canadian model, and then what is called the GFS or the US model. You're going to see what may look like to you subtle differences, but when it comes to the weather in the western high plains and Rockies, it's going to make a huge difference in what the weather really ends up doing. This is the European model for Sunday morning around sunrise. Notice the blue here right along the North Dakota border. This is obviously representing some very cold air surface and aloft, and it's showing the pipeline of cold being reinforced with another little vortex of cold here. There's another really big pocket of cold air there that could bring some 50 degree below zero temperatures to the north slope of Alaska by this weekend and early next week. This pattern here with the high here, building up into the Gulf of Alaska, then carving out that trough. This would, if the European model is correct, open the door to the coldest air of the season for Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Colorado's eastern plains, western Kansas. Note that west of the divide it will get cold as well, but the bitter cold Arctic air stays east of the divide in this pattern. But even the western slope, if the European is right, it is going to get much colder. Now what I'm going to show you is what the temperatures would look like Sunday morning if the European model is correct. Now look at these temperatures. These are in Fahrenheit, and you can see we've got 25, 30 degrees below zero, parts of Wyoming, 25, 27 degrees below zero, even all the way down to the I-70 corridor. Temperatures go sub-zero if the European model ends up being correct. All right, so there's one model. Here is the American model, or the GFS model. Notice, I'm going to go back to what the European model looks like here, the upper levels. Notice the center of the really cold air is up in the Dakotas, south central areas of Canada. If you look at the US model, it's all the way here north of Lake Superior at the exact same time. So you're looking at, and I showed you this yesterday, there's a huge displacement. The European is over here, and the American model is over here. Now this is really important in terms of the weather forecast you get, especially online, because 99.9% of the weather forecast you get on your smartphone, that you get off a lot of weather websites, is coming from the GFS model. Now this is where it could be shockingly different. So the GFS model is certainly cold, but instead of sub-zero, 20 to 30 degrees below zero, you have temperatures in the teens and the 20s. So yeah, it'll be getting cold, but instead of 23 in Cheyenne on the on the US model, it's 12 below on the European model. That is a 35 degree difference in temperature. So we're not talking about subtle changes. Now, if we were to look at the Canadian model, notice the Canadian model is a hybrid. We've got the core of cold air still over the Dakotas, but another cold pocket there over Lake Superior. So perhaps the Canadian model is kind of making a compromise. And actually, folks, sometimes that's exactly what happens. The reality of what happens in reality is not one particular model, but maybe two working together, trying to pick out what are the strengths or the weaknesses in the models. The Canadian is extremely cold. You can see all the blue getting pushed back into the western high plains and the Continental Divide. And these are the temperatures you get, which again, divides it right down the line. So what we're showing you here is the discrepancy in the models, but 2 out of the 3 models are now colder than they were yesterday. So the trend in the forecast now for the weekend looks a lot colder than it did just 24 hours ago. However, these are computer models. So when we talk tomorrow morning, let's see where we're at. Let's see if the models flip. They'll do that sometimes. Let's see if there's any more consistency. The bottom line is, even if the GFS model or the American model ends up being correct, it's going to get a lot colder. But if the Canadian or the European models are a reality, then you're looking at the coldest air of the season, bar none. So stock growers and travelers and everybody else really need to pay attention. And with these really cold temperatures, it is also going to snow. If you were to look at the snow equivalent, if you look at the next 10 days, really snowy across the western high plains and Rockies, very impressive snowfall totals. Look at the Bighorn Mountains, predicting over 5 feet of snow. Will it happen? 5 feet over 10 days? Maybe. But I will tell you that this pattern, as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, is really good for the mountains, including the Bighorns, which need a boost in the snow. So we're really looking at a wintry pattern setting on up here in the coming days. So stay tuned. We'll have more for you tomorrow. Let's see what the models say tomorrow for this upcoming weekend. Regardless, it's very interesting if you're a weather watcher. Have a good Tuesday.